Hi, my name is Samantha Schultz, and I am one of the instructors here at UMA for the MAA and MOPS program. This video, we're going to discuss the enforcement of the transaction and code sets. First, let's review our objective. So our objective is to perform within legal and ethical boundaries and apply federally, state, legislation, and regulations related to our healthcare. So we really focus on our HIPAA transactions. What is HIPAA? That is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Let's move on. So first, I just want to review the HIPAA transactions and code set standards. The HIPAA transaction and code set standards create a uniform way to perform any kind of electronic data interchange, the EDI, that are transactioned through submitting or processing any claim forms. Those are the CMS 1500 forms. So the standards apply to any healthcare entity, a health plan, a clearinghouse, a healthcare provider that does transmit any health information electronically. So we really want to look into the electronic transmissions. This is why these standards are in order and the transaction codes are there. So the HIPAA standards cover the healthcare and transactions of any kind of healthcare claims, which are basically our encounter information when we go into a physician's office and are translated into medical codes on that claim form. Healthcare payments, any kind of explanation of benefits, EOB, or remittance advice, RA, and you might hear that throughout all of your teachings in the healthcare realm. So what that is just the breakdown of what happened in that encounter as far as the date, what was diagnosed, what was the codes for the encounter itself, and the amount that was billed, the amount that was paid, and anything left over. It's just basically a big receipt. This also covers the transactions for coordination of benefits. This brings in a primary and a secondary payment plan. When a patient has two insurance coverages, this is where that will come into play. It also covers any kind of health claim status, if it's denied or paid or anything like that. Any kind of transmission of information electronically, they all have these transaction codes, and they have to be up to these standards to protect the patient's information. You can look at the eligibility for the health plan premium payments, and any kind of referral certifications. So these are covered under the electronic data interchange while forming these codes or transaction codes and set standards. So HIPAA transaction and code set standards are very important to consider when evaluating your practice management systems, the PM system, and your EHR systems, if you intend to submit claims and conduct any other HIPAA transactions electronically. So this is a big part of what we do inside of our EHRs and our practice management systems when we're using them inside of our office. So having this understanding of why this is important and the enforcement of it is a big side as well. So the Office of eHealth Standards and Services Standards are in charge of investigating any kind of privacy complaints. So think in mind when we're sending information electronically, this is one reason why we use those standards and those code sets to make sure that we're protecting that patient information. So we have our Office of eHealth Standards and Services come in to make sure that this is handled correctly. So if there's anything that said, oh, somebody, knows my information, they got it from this transaction or something like that, they have to go in and investigate what went wrong. Submitting any complaint via internet, they have to check that up. Possible monetary penalties will come to that office or any kind of area where the privacy was breached, and also criminal charges investigated by the Department of Justice. So they really take their stance on privacy very seriously, and they should. So we always have to keep in mind, even when we are transmitting information, we need to make sure that we are staying in compliance, just as we would if we were standing in front of the patient and collecting their information in front of a crowd. We would want to go into a different room. We would want to make sure that we're protecting this information. So, trading partner agreements. So this is between multiple people using the information. Okay, so these are the things that we have to keep in mind, because when we do send information out to our partners, there are agreements that we are agreeing to. And one of them is maintain integrity of that transaction, making sure that it is being sent or submitted with integrity, with keeping that information private. Protect against any kind of non-compliance with HIPAA. So non-compliance is going outside of HIPAA rules and principles that we all have to take seriously. So non-compliance is a big issue when we are not following the rules. That is called non-compliance. If it's not a HIPAA mandate, okay, they have to go in there and make sure what's going on if it's not mandated. And then data uses the same formatting for all claims. And so when we hear CMS 1500 form, it's like a universal claim form. What that means is it is set up to have the same information per patient, per encounter. We're not adding anything to it. We're not taking away anything to it. We are following the guidelines on how to fill out this information using those code sets. So let's take a minute and refresh a little bit. Change in any form can be difficult, right? But HIPAA mandated all of the healthcare plans to receive claims in the exact same format. So this is where we're coming in and making sure that we are using that same format on all of our claims. Prior to HIPAA, many of the health plans required supplemental information, any kind of separate forms to process the claims. And then other health plans, they insisted that the providers follow specific instructions. So as you can see, it was all over the place. So in a standard transaction, there are optional fields for those that need to put that extra or specific information in there. But then it's optional because some payers don't need to put that information in there. So payers appropriated some of those and required providers to supply certain information they felt that could process their claims. So they fixed that back and forth. I want it this way, I want it that way type of going back and forth. So the payers explained that requirements and companion guides to that transaction guides. So they came up with their own, let's do it this way. So it was approved by the publisher, and standard transaction implementation guides was born. So healthcare providers were soon forced to obtain any kind of guides to help them with each specific health plan, and insisted on changing that transaction format. So these types of adjustments worked with the interoperability of standard transaction, meaning it could work around many options. it could interchange with them. And that makes the coordination of benefits between the plans a little bit impossible. I'm sorry, possible. So there, as you can see, many hands were in the pot and they wanted to make sure that these claims were uniformed. So we have the transaction codes, we have the standards in place to fill out this claim form, to add the information that we need to make sure we're processing this information privately. So we are staying in guidelines and compliant with our HIPAA mandates. Okay, so as the Office of eHealth Standards and Services within the CMS, specifically to address that enforcement of the code set rule, the office operates independently from CMS to oversee, which brings out the administrative simplification overview. So the CMS will go ahead and look for voluntary compliance and expect to find the good faith and effort to comply with these standards. But if failure to comply is based on reasonable cause and is not due to willful neglect, then the HHS may not impose a civil monetary penalty. So here we go again. It's very enforced. They want to make sure that everyone is in compliance, that our claim forms are filled out correctly with all of the information needed per that encounter. They do have fines and penalties that are a part of their correction action plan. So the enforcement here really takes place by all of us doing our job, all of us staying in compliance and using these transaction standards and code sets. And that's the using the correct codes inside of our CMS 1500 form, and using the correct transaction code when we are sending or receiving information. Our non-compliance issues. So we spoke about some of the fines and penalties. So the Office of eHealth Standards and Services, as we were speaking about before, they operate independently from Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, but they also seek compliance rather than penalties. So what they try to do is have a middleman approach to it. They don't want to see fines or anything to that manner, but they also want to make sure that they are complying with all of the offices involved, right? The DHHS, the administrative simplification, and although I do agree, and you can ask yourself, do you agree that the law is needing to be so strict as far as if we do not follow this? Just think of how unorganized it would be if we had physicians sending in different claim forms, not using the code set forth as our code sets. I think that would cause a bit of unorganization. As we are learning, the electronic health record and the program management systems are really there to help us organize, save time, and be in compliance to make sure, you know, nothing gets out there into the hands that they don't need to be in. Right? There's fraud and abuse happening everywhere. And so what we did in healthcare is we took all of that and we said, okay, we're going to do it in this unified form to these standards using these code sets. And that way it's uniformed and it's not all over the place. So we do read a lot about this in our course, but it's because we have to understand the importance, right? And how to complete our forms correctly. Yes, we're doing it to get paid, but we're also doing it to stay in compliance with our HIPAA standards. So next time you read about transaction and code sets, I really want you to pay attention to what they are. The transactions, they are numbered and they're named for certain criterias. When you check up on a claim form, they have a transaction standard for that. And if we use the wrong code in a CMS 1500 form, then that is denied. So that's how strict they are, and they want everyone to be on the same page, because if it's all over the place, then it's really, how are we having the quality of care happening, and the privacy surrounding the patient's information. So I think we have a great understanding here about the transaction code sets, the standards involved, the administrative simplification, Title II, through our HIPAA law that we all will have to abide by in the healthcare field. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you do have any questions, please reach out to your instructor. We also have academic services that are on hand for you, and I hope you enjoyed.